Welcome to Stampscaping 101. In this video I finish off the scenes that I started, 3 videos ago in terms of the compositions on roads and paths. I finished off the coloring, and then I did some gel pen work on them, and I finish off in this one with some white pigment ink, very lightly applied with a simple cotton swab to create these kind of mistier types of applications of the very dry brushed ink process onto the scene to create that kind of mist down at the at the base of certain types of objects, to create some distance within our imagery, and to just kind of create an overall kind of a welcoming texture that is kind of this low-lying mist that you might see on a, I don't know, like a morning walk or something like that. It's just a fun little process to do, and it's one of those things, as I say in the video, that's it can be very, very subtle, but it can also be very effective in, achieving so many different things. We create a range of kind of soft within, otherwise crisp area. We can create distance by putting like a little bit of that mist behind this tree. I create separation between this row of oaks and that background. I can create lighting by putting a little bit on tops of these trees, so light is reflecting off some of these treetops. This flock stamp right here, the gulls, I even obscured some of those ones that are more distant and left the ones closer to us untouched to create a little bit of separation and distance within that actual design. Alright? I can set that horse in the meadow in a little bit of fog just by doing its legs down below. Okay? Or to create kind of a softer glow around things like moons or light sources and whatnot. So anyways, this is one of my favorite techniques that I tend to apply when I'm doing kind of a dye-based ink on glossy paper technique or look. I think it takes kind of decent looking scenes and makes them look better, and it makes some weak areas of my scenes seem a little bit less weak because I can obscure it in a little bit of fog, and then suddenly it looks like it belongs, or it's very purposeful as far as how I did it. So it saves me a lot of times, and I don't keep that any type of a secret. I think it just makes things look a lot better. Anyways, like, I didn't finish this one off right here, but just see that little pigment ink down here can vary our trees, making it look a little bit more backlit and illuminated. Okay, so it creates a lot of nice variations and a lot of nice textures and looks within your scene. Alright, so give it a try. If you choose to watch the video, I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it answers a lot of questions on kind of the application process of this medium onto your scenes. Okay, we're in the final step in these scenes as far as this one process goes, and it's the technique and media application that I've really come to really kind of almost depend on as far as taking my scenes, from their existing state to just that one extra step that I think kind of brings everything together. It makes scenes, I think, that look, pretty good, a little bit better, and it makes some scenes of mine that are kind of lacking and not so great. It makes them okay, so it saves me a lot of times in many ways. And that's pigment ink, white pigment ink over the dye-based inks and whatever other media that I've applied, okay? And the pigment ink application is done in very much of a dry brushed application. There's a lot of questions about this in terms of the process for those kind of new to it. A lot of times our pads are, very, very moist, and the biggest problem when starting this off is just kind of getting, it's not really a problem, but it's the biggest kind of misconception is the amount of ink that you would use. What you want to do is you want to apply this in a very light application where it's barely noticeable with a few taps, okay? Now, I don't think I'm going to finish every single one of these. That's it's a bit much, but if I just finish a couple of these, we'll do a little bit of a comparison contrast. And I'll tell you why I'm doing this as well. We'll kind of break it down into what's going on as far as the application process and what it's doing to the scene, okay? Alright, I happen to have a color box frost white that is very, very dry, relatively speaking, you know, in comparison to how they are when they are brand new. This one's very, very old, but if you are using, I tell you what, for this sake, I'll use a much wetter one. I think this one right here, it's really kind of beat up and indented and whatnot, because I think I re-inked it at one time, so it's kind of a sloppy pad, but you know, a lot of us are using brand new ones, so, or really not brand new, but they're just filled, okay? Let me show you the difference between the two of these. These are both frost white color box, okay? I also happen to have a Hero Arts unicorn one that would work just fine. There's all kinds of different white pigment inks out there. The one that I would not use is the Brilliance Moonlight White. I love this pad, but it just dries too quick for our purposes here, okay? Sometimes I'll use it in conjunction with one of these, like say if I want to get a little bit lighter in a certain area, and it's just not getting any lighter using the more kind of translucent color box ones, so I'll hit, you know, the Brilliance in an area. But this has different characteristics than what we are going after, okay? Now, I'm using white, but I am going to get into kind of the experimentation with some of these darker types of pigment inks for this type of purpose at some point in time. I've been playing around a little bit with the robin's egg, but I haven't really investigated those kind of fully, and I want to do that. Okay, we have a dark piece of paper right here, okay? And I'll show you kind of the consistency that we're going after. Now, I'm using a real cotton swab, okay? It's not one of those more acrylic ones that are really tightly bound. I'm going for a really soft application of this ink, so I need a soft applicator, okay? Now, if I'm going for some very kind of specific areas, I want something small, so something like this comes in handy, but I have applied pigment ink using kind of sponge applicators, such as the Color Box Stylus tool if I have a big area to cover, okay? So you can still do that too, but I find that these work really well. Okay, now see this right here? I'm tapping this fairly firmly because I just know that this one is fairly dry. But in doing so, okay, now let's see. After I do this a while, the tip of this gets kind of smashed, and I kind of get an even coating, you know, across this. So watch this right here. Let's see, let me zoom in here, and I will promise to try and keep my work area within the frame of that we can see. Okay, watch this right here. Light tapping. It's barely visible, right? See that? And the more I go, and I can tap it harder if I want to, but this is the consistency that you want. You want it very dry and light, okay? Because one of the tricks to this is how to taper off that application into a much lighter and barely visible touch, okay? Now see, that's the trick right there. It goes from kind of heavier application to lighter, and what this is doing is we're going from light to dark, okay? And that's the same type of thing that I'm doing on here, you know, with inks, except it's the reverse. It's going from dark to light when I kind of do these swipes like this onto a scene, okay? I'm going from dark to light, but when we start working around with this, we're working from the light areas and working it into the darker areas. So we're going from light to dark. Okay? So it's kind of the complementary application to darker inks, okay? Darker inks meaning just any kind of dye-based ink. Okay, now let me show you what this looks like with a wet pad, okay? And this is what everyone does too. Okay, I've just kind of tapped some ink on here, okay? And this is what I have right here. See that? And that's exactly the thing that makes it very difficult to apply, okay? So if you have that, what you do is you just kind of blot it off a little bit, okay? Get a lot of that off. Now, first of all, don't, you know, if you're watching this video, just don't apply so much. Just get a really light touch of it if your pad is really wet. But see this, you know, after I kind of, you know, rub it off, I'm using the opposite end of this swab here, but watch this right here. Okay, so see I have that consistency now because I've tapped a lot of it off, okay? Yeah, the tip here isn't quite soft, so let me just kind of, I'm going to kind of fray it a little bit. I'm going to loosen up that that winding I don't know, whatever configuration of this cotton around this stick a little bit. So I've loosened that up a touch, okay? And see this? I'm just kind of lightly tapping it, okay? So kind of do this on a, you know, a blank piece of paper, and I would do it on a darker piece of paper so you can see what you're going to be applying, right? So I use this often as fog, but I often use it for a glowing star or like a firefly or something like that. So the way I do it with the firefly is, let's say that there's a little firefly like around, or that's a star or something like that. And if I want to create a little bit of glow, I just kind of tap a little pigment ink around it, and that little dot is glowing. See this one right here? That's all there is to it, right? So it's not that right there. It's this. Watch 1, 2, 3. You can barely see it, right? And then more. I mean, you can have more ink on here, but I'm just saying, you know, to get the feel of it, what you want to have is barely anything on there. So you can adjust that with the amount of ink you apply to this, the amount of ink that you kind of tap off before you apply it, and how hard you kind of tap it down. Most people get this now. I say, take most of the ink off, and they go like this. I can't see anything, so they go like that, you know, and they have that big thing again, okay? So just take it nice and gradually, and that's all you have to do. You know, it takes a little time, but not that much time, okay? Alright, now that being said, if you get these kind of darker marks like that, especially on glossy paper, you can just kind of rub it right off, okay? Now this is not glossy, okay, so it's not coming off as easy, but, you know, you can kind of rub it off. And on glossy paper, it'll just kind of buff right off. Let me see if this is a Star Dream paper, but let me see if I can get some of that off a little bit more. Yeah, kind of. But matte paper, it'll stick a little bit more, so on matte paper, just be a little more careful. Okay, alright, so let's take a look at this scene right here. It's really vibrant in terms of the intensity of inks, okay? I mean, it looks okay. It has a certain charm to it, I think, you know, having kind of all fairly intense colors, okay? Normally I like to have a range of intensity, being something dull and something very bright. These are all colors that are very bright on here, and I think it looks okay, but I don't know, it's a little bit hot for me, okay, in terms of just the sheer vibrancy. So let's take a look here, and let's see where we can use some of this. Now, if you notice, I've left some areas light in here, okay? You can watch the coloring video that I have for all of these scenes here 2 videos ago. Okay, but I also have all those little flowers kind of in here, which was the last video, and they're all very crisp, okay? So we're talking about very crisp little dots everywhere in here and very intense colors, okay? Well, let's take a look at this, okay? This pigment in application, all right? We have this lighter area behind these trees, and I'm going to go into it, and I'm going to say that some of the light is kind of coming through those trees. Okay, this is really dull right now. Let me add a little bit more ink to it. Okay, and I'm applying this to some of this tree where it comes in contact with that light in the background in the form of this little vapor area representing, I guess, a cloud. And see, I'm just kind of softening the top of that impression a little bit, okay? So what I'm saying is, I'm saying that kind of light is coming from that area, right? Okay, so light is hitting in here. Now let's put a little bit of fog. I like to kind of represent this kind of vapor hovering around kind of the surface of lakes and meadows and things like that. It kind of gives it a kind of a magical feel. They do it in movies all the time, in stage productions. You know, they have that smoke machine, fog machine. If it's a Halloween type of thing, then it certainly adds that type of atmosphere. But having that kind of low line fog over the surface does a few different types of things, in addition to kind of making things look a little bit more mystical, okay? So let's do this right here, okay? Okay, let me come down a little bit more. Okay. Alright, so see, this area right here is lighter on the top of this ridge. This is why I kind of vary my lights and darks across something. Is that if I go back into it with things like highlights or whatnot, I'll know where, you know, where to apply that type of thing. Okay, see how that kind of starts softening that area in there a little bit? See, I'm just kind of barely tapping it down, okay? Now, I don't see this whole area as one solid thing to address in exactly the same way. That's what happens a lot of times. People say, okay, I'm going to add fog over this grass, so they add it over the entire thing. But it looks much better to kind of oscillate things, okay? See this cabin right here with that really sharp kind of grass back there, but we have the lighting back there. If the light is coming from back there, I can kind of add a little bit of this in here, and it looks like that light is hitting a little bit of fog back there, and where this area of shadow, where this light meets shadow, I can kind of work this up into there a little bit. And now we have that little area, and what is it doing? It's glowing, right? So what we're doing is you're adding light into an area that is darker. It doesn't have to be dark. It shows up better in the dark. But what you're saying is that light is hitting this suspended moisture in the air, and it's illuminating it. So it's almost like you're adding these light sources throughout your scene like that. And it's kind of a soft, glowing light. And soft pairs very well with this crisp and intense and sharp, okay, because it extends that kind of visual language much further than it is without this, okay? So let's put this in like an area like this at the base of this tree right there. I tend to put it at the base of things, you know, because it's kind of that low line fog, but you can see what that did right there. See that? Suddenly it adds kind of a little bit of visual interest, okay? And it's barely on there. It's just a very, very faint little amount, okay? But we have that creeping area of fog, okay? So this area right here is really crisp, okay? And we'll do something like that. But look at that. See that little area? And I can do something back there as well, but just doing a little bit of comparison contrast. Here's these trees right here with a little bit of fog back there, and here it is without. This looks okay, though, to me, but I think that looks a little bit better. And It's really not a very big commitment to that pigment ink at all. And that's what it's all about. It's about kind of, you know, a very light application of something. It's about subtlety, okay? I don't know, I say that it's subtle, but for me, I'm all into details, so it does make a fairly big statement. Suddenly, when you have soft, then crisp really comes out, you know, much more prominently when you have something. Now see, I'm kind of muting some colors too. So when you mute a color, meaning I'm kind of adding this, it's almost like adding this frost over in front of something. It's going to dull it down, right? But it makes a really nice complement to that more intense color. So the intense areas look a little bit more intense just by putting something dull next to it. Dark tends to look darker by putting something light next to it. So you're kind of doing this little interplay of all of these types of aspects of kind of the visual language that's happening within a scene. Okay, see that little fog back there? This area is just left as is. I didn't cover the entire tree, I covered a little bit of it. This little bush right there, I didn't cover the whole thing, I covered just a tiny bit of it. And see, it kind of looks really integrated now in the background. This looks okay too, but look how integrated that looks. I'm putting some over this. Let's put some over this one right here. We have this little area of darkness right here. I'm not going to put it over this entire bank right here, foreground bank, but let's put a little bit of it in here. Okay. Alright. See that like that? Okay. So suddenly, it's kind of looking a little bit more magical to me. One thing in this scene that, when I colored it, it kind of bothered me a little bit. Not in terms of, you know, it was a mistake or anything like that, because I knew this process would come, and this process right here, this ink application, is the great equalizer. If I don't like something, then I can kind of subdue it. But like this one right in here, this cabin is, I don't know, it's kind of intense for me, and I want it to set back into the scene a little bit more. So what I can do is I can just take this, see how light that is? And I'm just kind of building it up a little bit. I'm kind of setting it within this little veil of mist or fog. So we can see this mist is almost like a character within the scene, okay? Now suddenly it's kind of setting behind it. I've pushed it behind something, and all I've pushed it behind is kind of this little bit of, I guess, obscurity, you know? Just in a little portion of it, okay? Putting some back here at the base of that little bush back there. But see now, this little cabin is, it's kind of sitting in this little area. Now, when I'm doing this, oftentimes I'm barely applying any, so I haven't been removing too much, but see, I put too much right here. That's, I don't know, it's more like a snowman being built. So I just kind of remove it. I just kind of, I dab it off. Often I use my finger. I just dab, 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 and it comes off of my finger, and that's my kind of, not applicator, I guess my remover of pigment ink. So sometimes I go like that if it's a little bit too light. Now one of the things about pigment ink, it's going to dry darker, okay, than when you applied it. So not darker than something that you've applied over. It's just not quite as translucent. It becomes a little bit more, moves towards the transparent area. Okay, so you have to apply a little bit more than you'll think you need. But what I would apply it to where you like it, and then apply more if after when it dries it isn't light enough for you. Okay, usually if that's the case, it's not that it's too dark everywhere. You know, I want certain parts of it just to stand out a little bit more. Like right in here, I might put a little bit more there. Okay, or like in the middle of this little veil. Again, because I want that kind of transition. I want light to dark. Okay, so sometimes what I do is, if that lightest area in here isn't light enough, what I'll do is I'll hit it in here a little bit more after it dries, but not over here. I'm talking about on the scenes, you know, in terms of the lighter portion. Okay, we have this cow here, all right? This cow is enjoying its, you know, its evening graze, and I'll put it in a little bit of this veil of mist. It's saying that the grass and everything is very moist, you know, perfect growing conditions for that grass. See, the sides of my pathway can be a little bit varied. From a textural standpoint, we have crisp, now we have kind of soft, okay, from using this. So you're extending the textural range of your scene out by using some of this. The intensity spectrum, we're dulling out certain areas, you know, that and they're not quite so intense, and it just gives that overall kind of, you know, kind of magical little quality, okay? Something like that. And I don't know, it is kind of lighting that we're doing here. You're saying, okay, that some areas light is hitting it and it is influencing the object. Alright, so there we have it on that one. So let's take a look at these, at a couple of these right now, okay? Here's with and without. I think this looks fine, but that little amount is really fun. Okay, let's take a look at this one right here. Let's take a look at these birds right here, you know, how we can kind of influence depth within a scene, okay? This farbird in here, let's say that that farbird, you know, is kind of obscured a little bit because it's deeper, you know, there's moisture in the air, and that, you know, when light is kind of reflecting off one of those farbirds, and it becomes much lighter, so I can kind of adjust the depth within that little tiny design of birds. So now see that right there? It's darker as it gets closer to you, but as it flies away, it's getting a little bit more enveloped in the suspended moisture in the air that's kind of breaking up that object, okay? So I can push depth within that just little given space, if that makes sense, okay? Things in the distance are often kind of lighter because of all that, you know, the light is breaking up and all the particles and dust in the air and moisture in the air and whatnot. Okay, these trees in here, let's do something right in here. I can kind of vary the appearance of them. See that right there? At the base of it, it's just a little bit lighter. So you're saying at the base of the tree we have that kind of low-lying mist or fog, maybe. Same thing over here. I'm putting kind of a little bit of a, like a, I don't know, a little cloud, no, not cloud, but a kind of this blanket of mist that's kind of behind on the other side of this hill, so it kind of creates a little bit of depth between this area right here in the background, I would say. So it's creating space too. It's creating separation. Let's look at this one over here. Okay, let's illuminate that one a little touch, you know, down at the base maybe. So see that variation right there? Now it looks a little bit different right over here. So see what that's doing right in there? Let's put a little bit of light up on top of these tree limbs. I have this area of light back there. So let's put a little bit of this in some light. We're saying that the light in the scene is influencing our objects, the object's appearance. See that? Okay. So you see that kind of illumination that's happening back there. It's just kind of changing the look of it, isn't it? Let's look at here. Okay, we have this horse. I like to put things at the base of things. If it's a little fisherman or something like that out in the water, I like to kind of put a little bit of mist or fog at the base of it to vary the form a touch. Let's break up this little crisp edge to the road a little bit. Not everywhere, but just oscillate it a little bit. Okay, so it changes that a little bit. This is looking really crisp out here, which is okay, but let's put it in a little bit of mist back here. Bring a little bit of light into it and softness as well, texturally. And let's kind of taper it out here. Okay. Changed those background trees quite a bit though, didn't it? In terms of the distance and appearance of that general space. Okay, see that right there? Oh, that's a little bit too much. It'll dry a little bit lighter. It's like waking up in the morning and kind of seeing this kind of dawn type of setting maybe. Yeah, I'm going to take off a little bit of that. Okay, but anyways, there you have it. Let's take a look at those trees again. That really helped back there, I would say. Same thing with that tree. It's little details, I think, you know? Tops of the tree, oscillating it, not covering up the entire thing, just putting it here and there and leaving some areas crisp. So you get this kind of variation that's happening within the designs. Okay, let's take a look at this one. This one's looking super, super busy in terms of, you know, from a textural standpoint. Here's what I like to do too for mountains. You know, mountains often have their own kind of weather pattern or whatever. But that's kind of some snow up top there. Let's say that that area up top is kind of windy, and little areas of snow flurries and whatnot might be whipping off the top of it. So we can go into it. And what's an otherwise very crisp impression of the mountain, I can kind of soften up some of these lines and achieve kind of a grayscale type of touch in there. Maybe some of this snow is kind of wisping off the peaks. Okay, now at the base of this hill, this mountain, we do have this area that's a little bit lighter down at the base there, but if I want to create a little bit more separation between the two, I can put a little bit more pigment ink down there and say, okay, maybe that's going down into the valley before the mountain, so maybe there's a little bit of this mist and this valley behind this corner. You can see that building up a little bit of a cloud back there. It can create kind of a textural shift from the curvilinear road again. Same road as in this one right here. But see that little cloud that's kind of being created? I'm just kind of building it up a little bit. So, you know, separating it in terms of value. It's a little bit lighter back there now, and it's a little bit softer too. Okay, let's create a little bit of change in this mountain a little bit. I'll put some, you know, kind of fog or clouds up top. I mean, it looks okay as is, but since I think it's becoming a little bit more, oh, I don't know, maybe this area is becoming a little bit more sophisticated, and just in terms of there's a lot more variation now in terms of lights and darks and textures. And I don't know, when you kind of add this kind of softer look, which isn't so crisp again, I think it gives the appearance of the object looking like it's much farther back now within the scene, or in the scene. See, like that? It has a little bit of a different texture. Alright. Okay, let's remember at the base of some of these trees right in here. Let's try some of that and see what it looks like. A little bit of illumination, softening, and again, it creates a little bit of separation too in terms of space. Now we're saying that there's something in front of that tree, but in a very subtle way. Okay, remember at the base of my subject matter, like cow or horse, you know, I can put this at the base of this rider and see if I like it. If I don't like it, I can just wipe it right off. Something like that. And down here in the road, where it gets a little bit too busy for me, I'll put a little bit of this down here and see if I like it. Yeah, I think it looks pretty good. along the edge of the curvilinear road where it's very definitive. Put a little bit down like so. Now what you do is you just have to hold it at arm's length every now and then to see what this is looking like. We tend to get very detail oriented when we're applying this type of thing to any given space, and it's easy to go overboard. See, I'm starting to get there on this one. I think I'm going to remove some of this or darken it a little bit, but I think this looks best around this mountain area, so let me take that and maybe that highest summit up there, I'll just kind of apply some of this ink and create a little bit more depth within that space or on that object. Like that, I think. When you're doing that, you're saying that that mountain is really tall. It's kind of going up into the atmosphere or whatever. So I think, you know, you're doing a couple things. You're kind of obscuring it a little bit, but I think the grandeur of it becomes more. It increases because you're saying that the mountain is now something much taller. It's entering the atmosphere or whatever. It's, I don't know, what, 14,000 feet up or something. See that? So we've varied things a little bit. There's a lot of pigment ink over the top of it. You can see it coming from the base up here. We have a little bit of it down here too, but didn't have to do too much of it. Okay. Alright. So there we have that. Let's take a look at something different here. Let's take a look at this one right here, the moonlight scene, okay? The moon looks pretty good to me, as is, but let's try to alter its texture, okay? We see, you know, when we think of a moon, we're thinking of that glowing moonlight. Let's put a little bit of light over some of this impression. Okay, so it seems like it's glowing a little bit more. I've kind of obscured some of those lines going in front of it a little bit. Alright, now down here, I think we can really, in like a moonlit situation, I think we can really add in some kind of interesting fog types of I don't know, applications, shapes. Okay, see that kind of going in front of that fence right there. Let's take a look at this row of houses right here. Okay, see that? Fog really seems to be very, very appropriate in this scene from a thematic standpoint. I mean, it doesn't look out of place on the other ones, but the other ones I just kind of added in there for I don't know, any excuse possible, but this one really looks like it would be long in here. And it looks a little bit more reality than, say, like fantasy. Okay, now see, I've left a little bit of this cloud up here light. I can kind of go into that area and illuminate it a little bit. So it's like the clouds are reflecting that moonlight in a very soft way. The clouds above the moon could be bottom little touch, you know, and kind of be made to appear to glow. So it's looking a little bit softer up there. Let's take a look at how it looks overall. Put some of this fog down on this road. Okay. That looks pretty good. So down here, it's quite a bit around here, creeping around the base of those houses, a little bit out here too. Let's put some more up by these houses. Very light taps. It's a very dark area over here, so I don't want too much of it. Okay? So this kind of creates an interesting surface texture. Alright, now sometimes when things get a little bit too crazy, like in this one is just too vibrant everywhere. It's too crisp everywhere. There's just too much of everything. Let's go into it and knock some of that back a little bit, okay? I just re-inked and I put quite a bit of ink onto this, but I think it might require that. Okay. So this is where kind of the control of intensity will really be beneficial, okay? Intensity meaning bright and dull. There's a lot of brightness everywhere in this scene, so I'm kind of dulling some areas out by kind of obscuring some of it with this white ink. It's putting this kind of translucent texture over the top of it, this translucent soft texture, okay? So it's muting some of the colors, okay? But you don't want to do it over everything. You just want to vary the surface a little bit. So I don't want to mute everything out, then everything is going to be muted, okay? I want a little taste of everything in here, or a little touch, a little range, you might say. Okay. Okay, I'm going to create a little bit of a space in between the end of this path, and I'm going to create kind of like it's a slope back there, okay? I think what I'll do is I'll actually employ the use of a mask here. Alright. Okay, there we go. Okay, so you see that? This little kind of cloud back there. I'll add more to create an even more of a separation. Okay, so let's create a little bit of separation between this tree and the background here. Put a little bit of this behind it. Okay, I think something like that. Assessing. Alright, there's one more. I'm not going to do that. This is very similar to really all the other ones, but I especially like this one right here. Okay. I don't know, I'll finish it at some point in time. Actually, see, I say that then. See, this would be a perfect spot for this. See that tree right in back there? Really could use a little bit of variation, that light coming from the back of these trees. You just kind of put a little column of this color, and kind of creates that nice illumination back in there, like that. Okay, see that right there? I can even put it at the base if I want to. You have that kind of backlit tree, like so. Okay, so anyway, you can see where that pigment ink really comes into play. The slow drying pigment ink, that is, as opposed to the faster drying Brilliance brand one, which has its place. I just wouldn't use it for this type of technique right here. Let's take a look at some of these. All of them. Okay. So we can see, I think that that cloudy kind of mist plays no small part, you know, in these scenes. I feel it's rather an integral part of the scene in terms of lighting and illumination. Okay, there it is around this moon, around here, around the base of those houses. Kind of creates a nice atmosphere and feel to it. Right? And here, where things got a little bit too intense, it helps to break up the intensity a little bit and creates a nice softness in here, you know, where everything was intense, you kind of obscure it a little bit, so it varies the surface in terms of the intensity and just kind of mellows things out a little bit. On this one right here, we can kind of create grandeur by going over it. And it's, you know, this whole mountain is stamped out, you know, that black dark over here, okay, but just kind of applying some of those inks over the top of it, the pigment ink, it dulls it out and it pushes it back in space, you know, from a visual standpoint. Okay. On this one right here, we've varied it a little bit. Instead of, you know, kind of dulling out the top, I've kind of dulled out the bottom, and I've said there's this low line mist, and by putting it right down here, I've taken that stamp and I've pushed it into the distance, because now we have this kind of mist in between this layer and the background layer, okay? I put it on tops of some of the trees reflecting light. The birds right here are have a range of values now. I've put some ink over the top of these ones in the back, so the ones that are darker seem a little bit closer as they're flying off into that, I don't know, sky, the base of the horse. It kind of makes them sit in, you know, that area a little bit more. Kind of a softer kind of pathway into the scene. Makes it look kind of inviting. And this one right here, again, putting a little bit of mist behind something kind of creates that separation between the two areas right here. Obscuring partials, you know, making things look a little bit more rounded and varied. Okay, right in here, see these people are kind of close to us. They're walking home into the I don't know, the magical terrain. Okay, so anyway, use very little on your applicator unless you have a very dry pigment ink bed like I do. Okay, so be very careful about the amount that you apply down. If you're doing it on glossy paper though, you don't need to worry about if you get too much on something, because you can always just wipe it right off. You can do it with your finger, you can take a paper towel and buff it out. If you don't like what you see when these dry on these cards too, just take a paper towel and you can buff right out the dry version of it as well. Except for the Brilliance ink, that's why I use the color box ink, okay? So I'm just going to get this glare out of these scenes. And hopefully you can kind of tell the difference between, you know, kind of scenes without and scenes with. That type of application, it can be rather effective, and it's kind of one of those more little detailed aspect to the scenes in terms of the finished product, but again, it can be really effective for you in so many ways. Alright, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Go out and get some cotton swabs or Q-tips or whatever. Use the real cotton ones, and your pigment ink, and give it a try.